Hi, everyone. This is Tandy Elisala, and this virtual summit is a special event that is part of our National Caregiving Conference, which happens November 9th and 10th in Chicago, Illinois. Today, I am honored and pleased to welcome Bobby Carducci with us. Bobby, welcome and to the virtual summit. And if you would fill in the gaps, share with us more about your caregiving experience and what talk or talks we can expect to hear you or see you doing in Chicago this November.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have been selected to be part of the National Caregiver Conference. I came to this caregiving world in 2002 when my mother-in-law passed away and my father-in-law came to live with us. And I was his primary caregiver for 7 years. And during that time, we discovered that he had not only dementia, but he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia very early in his life. And then he developed Parkinson's disease, and he had dysphagia. So his swallowing problems were a difficulty. He had congestive heart failure. And one thing that I think is unique in our case anyway was what I called stubborn old Italian disease. So it was a challenge. I really didn't know how difficult it was going to be or how long it was going to be when we originally brought him into our home. In my perfect ignorance, I thought once he got into my home that everything would be fine and he would flourish in my care. That, as we all know, didn't happen. I consider the time that I spent with him a gift, however. But having learned, as I went through the process, how important it is to be a caregiver and how difficult it is and how much support caregivers need, I decided that once my time as an active caregiver was over, I would do whatever I could to support caregivers. I'm now a trained caregiver support group leader. So I lead a caregiver support group in my community. I write about it, I blog about it, and I speak about it on the national level. I attend a lot of caregiver conferences because I'm always learning from other caregivers and the experts in this field. I'm going to be presenting on life after caregiving. And I have to admit that when my father-in-law passed away, it was a very difficult time for several months as I tried to figure out what do I do now, because so much of my life had been consumed in seeing to his needs. It helped that I was a writer and I had started writing a book about my experience called Confessions of an Imperfect Caregiver during the time that he was with us. I wasn't able to complete it until at least 2 years after he died because going back into that emotional time was very, very trying for me. But I knew I was going to do that. I knew that I was going to write the book. And I knew I was going to support caregivers. But I think the most important thing we need to do when our caregiving journey first enters is just take the time to rest and to heal. And do the things that make you feel comfortable and get the rest that you absolutely need. And then what we want to do is go back and look at the special times that we had with the person that we were caring for. And one of the things I like to highlight when I'm talking to caregivers is we very often share the difficult part of the journey. But I had some amazing moments with this man, and I feel that was a gift. And when we can begin to go back and look at those, I think that's when our strength begins to build. I also did a lot of crying and praying during the time that I was a caregiver. And I have to say, I got some amazing messages from some of those prayers.
Wow, Bobby, we share similar paths with our caregiving experience. It's pretty interesting. Yours was with your father-in-law. Mine was with both my parents. My mother had paranoid schizophrenia, as well as cancer and kidney failure and a lot of other things. And my dad had traumatic brain injury as a result of a massive car accident. And we both wrote books about our caregiving journey and so many other things as you were talking. And I think it's so powerful when we can help caregivers that are in the thrust of it right now, or even on the back end of it, that are saying, okay, now what? Like, my life has been consumed with this. What does this mean? What am I going to make it mean? And how do I bounce forward in life? And so I think it's great that you are helping caregivers to do just that.
I appreciate that you're saying that. In my lifetime, I've been given two gifts that I didn't know that I wanted. The first one was when I was 8 years old, and my best friend's mother got impatient with us running through the house on a rainy afternoon and gave us a piece of paper and a pencil and said, sit down and write something. And I never thought about writing a story, but eventually the words started to come. And at the end of the day, she said, Bobby, this is good. You should continue writing. And I took that advice and I continued doing it. And that was a gift I didn't know I wanted. And then when my father-in-law came to live with us and I had this caregiving experience, that was a second gift that I didn't know that I wanted. And I was able to bring the two of them together and continue a mission that I think I was meant to have. At one point, when he was in the hospital, close to the end, he woke up and he said, I had a dream last night that God told me my job was done. And when I shared that with a friend of mine, he said, Bobby, do you realize that you were his job? Exactly. That he was teaching you to do what you're doing now?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's beautiful. I felt the same way about my dad. I felt like he was our master teacher.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I really believe that people enter our lives to teach us or to learn from us, and very often both. And that man was my best teacher.
Wow. What a great perspective. Okay. Well, we all know that caregiving it often is very, very challenging. So how do we find our best during caregiving, Bobby?
I have to admit that what you said is absolutely true. It's all consuming. It's exhausting. It's not easy, and not everybody can do it. Not everybody should do it. Towards the end, I was having panic attacks. I was having migraine headaches. My hair was falling out, the exhaustion. So at that point in time, it was difficult to find our best selves. But I think it's in the trying, and it's in what I call creative problem solving on the run. Trying to find a way in the moment to deal with the issues. And I think some of my best moments came when he had what I call moments of clarity. And he would recognize that and say, she's my best friend. But we definitely need to be kind to ourselves, and we definitely need to look at, in diversity, we often find our strength, and we often recognize who we are at our very core. There was one point where I had been walking around the house and saying, why does it have to be so hard? Why is it so hard to do good work? God, I do not understand. Why is it so hard? And we went to church, and the priest got up and said, I've been hearing a lot from people lately that, why is life so difficult? And I got goosebumps because I was getting the message. And he said, nobody told you it was supposed to be easy. But when you're doing the hard work, you're earning your place in heaven. So I thought, okay. Now, I didn't always believe that, but very often when my husband would come home and I'd had a really difficult day, I'd be tapping my foot and say, guess what? I earned my place in heaven today. I hope it's true. I hope it's true. But that little bit of humor and that little bit of hope went a long way.
Humor and hope. Wonderful. Looking back on your experience with your father-in-law, what was your best caregiving moment?
I had a lot of them. Because he was so introverted and because of the schizophrenia and the dementia, he most often, when he was still able to move around the house, wanted to be by himself, but every now and then he would want to talk, and he'd share stories of his life in Italy, growing up on a farm, and the hard work, and then on Saturday evening, rolling up the carpet in the kitchen, and the family would hold dances, and he would dance the tango with the pretty girls. I loved hearing about that. But we also had a very special moment right here in this room, which is our dining room, on an Easter Sunday when I prepared a special meal for the three of us and sat him at the head of the table. And he was confused by that. He said, me at the head of the table? Mike should be at the head of the table. I said, not today, this is for you. And I prepared his special meals, and he started to eat, and then he looked up with tears in his eyes, and he said, I never thought I would have something like this. Everything is beautiful. The table, the dishes, the pretty ladies on the wall. I grew up poor on a farm in Italy. I can't believe I'm going to die in a house like this. Thank you. And that moment not only was special then, but it's something that we carry with us every single day. I have to say that was my best caregiving moment right there.
Wow, that's beautiful. When we're feeling at our worst, what can we do as caregivers to reframe that and to feel better?
One of the things that we see discussed, or at least I do frequently, is dealing with caregiver guilt. And the guilt comes when we maybe lose our temper, or we just want it to be over. When we're not the sweet, nice, kind person we like to think we are, when we have those moments where we're truly human, and we end up feeling terribly guilty. And what I now share with caregivers is we are human, and we are going to have these moments, and we are going to feel guilty. And there's really no way to deal with it other than to accept it in the moment. Give yourself 10 or 15 minutes to feel the guilt. Realize that you're going to do better the next time, or do your best every single day, and move on from it. Because telling us not to feel guilty doesn't help. I have a next door neighbor that says guilt is a useless emotion. Just don't feel guilty. But I don't know. I don't think I can say I'm never going to feel guilty. But I have learned to accept it and accept my own humanity and try to do better the next time.
Bobby, that's beautiful. And that's, part of my message too, that, amid caregiver guilt and shame, the first step towards feeling better is, in fact, embracing it and feeling into your emotions.
Yes.
For people to say, get over it, or just don't, that's not how the mind works. Yeah. And so when we are in that space, we've really, really, really got to feel it, because the only way through situations is through them.
And one of the things that, people outside would say, especially when they understood it was my father-in-law and not a blood relative that I was caring for, would say, oh, you must be a saint. And my response was always, I'm no saint, and he would have been the first to agree with me.
Yeah. I remember sometimes I did my best to not yell at my parents. I really, really focused on, their dignity, respecting them, and yet there were 2 times in 2.5 years that I yelled at my dad. And then I felt guilty.
Absolutely.
for yelling, and I just had to accept it and say, okay, I yelled at him. Like, I can't take it back. I can't,
Mm-hmm.
and I found myself at first like trying to justify it, like,
Oh, of course.
all those little things that happen in our mind with our mindset, right? And then when I just accepted it, it was like, okay, I did it. Like, yeah. And, and apologize. And, both we mutually apologize to each other. And I don't know, I just think in that moment, like we as caregivers have those kinds of moments where we have to make decisions. And a lot of times when our emotions, we have this pool of emotions that are like swirling around all the time. And it can be really, really challenging. Is there, or was there a specific tip or tool or hack that you use to help you separate those or integrate them in a way that allowed you to be the best caregiver you could be while preserving your own mental health well-being?
The best way that I dealt with really strong emotions that I was having difficulty with, I have to admit, is something I've done since childhood, is go into a book and read. And it took me into a different world and let me focus on another issue until I was able to be calm enough that I could reason through it. Like many people, maybe even most people, trying to find a solution or a reason for things that are trying to control the uncontrollable, right, is so difficult to deal with, and I just needed to step back from it for a while, and I did have that resource. And I also had his doctors and my husband telling me, sometimes you have to raise your voice to get them to listen. And maybe it was the Italian, I don't know. But that seemed to be true, but I never felt comfortable with it. I never felt comfortable.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Well, are there any, as we wrap up this virtual summit in preparation for the actual summit in November in Chicago, are there any last thoughts or parting words that you'd like to leave with those watching this virtual summit?
Yes, absolutely try to attend the summit if you can, to learn from other caregivers, because so many times caregivers will say, if you haven't done it, you cannot understand what it's like. And that is so true. Even my own daughter said, until I read some of these books on caregiving, I had no idea how difficult it was. And, she only lived 20 miles away and she was very close to her grandfather. And just being able to be in the presence of other people who understand, and you can share tips with each other, and absolutely be kind to yourself. And, I continue to go to caregiver conferences, both not only as a speaker, but also an attendee, because I'm always learning from other caregivers. I suggest that caregivers do that as much as possible. And if they can't get out of the house to go, then they go online. And, our summit is going to be available online as well. And know that we're here to help.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bobby, for being here and for sharing your story, your wisdom, your experience, and for being an advocate for caregivers and, doing the work that you're doing out in the world. So thank you.
Again, thank you for having me, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yes, you as well. All right. Take care, everyone. Till next time.
Bye for now.